Well, for those of you who are watching on YouTube or listening on your podcasting app, thank you for indulging me. I am I'm looking at my three best-selling books ever. I think I've written 42, but three of them hit number one, and a lot of them hit the top 50, top 20, top 10. But I had three that hit number one. Uh, just an incredible honor because most people don't have a top 1,000 book, but to have three hit number one, well, it just blows me away. And it could almost sound like I'm doing a bit of humble brag, and maybe there is that. And yeah, I am excited about these books and others that I have written, but I hope that you will hear me talk about these books in a way that if you haven't read them, you will read them, but for the benefit of the kingdom, for the benefit of your church. The reason that they were bestsellers is because they were helping churches, and they still are today, as a matter of fact. I'm going to be talking about Autopsy of a Deceased Church in just a few minutes, but thank you, Cheney and Associates. You heard the nice lady at the beginning say that Cheney and Associates is our sponsor. Well, they are our ministry partner. And listen, if you're still doing bookkeeping in your church, if you're still doing all the accounting, tax prep, they are the organization that needs to do it. They work with over 1,000, over 1,100 churches. They know the church. They are the accounting firm for the church. So go to the show notes and go to CheneyAssociates.com and tell them Thom at Church Answer sent you. And you're going to be blessed with what they can do for you. Okay, so with all the caveats of my, I guess, reluctance, I'm not reluctant if I've already scripted out the podcast and I'm talking to you now, but my caveats of concern about talking about touting my own work. Okay, I've put that out there, but I do want to talk about Autopsy of Deceased Church. If you listen to my story about Simple Church in the previous episode, you heard me say that I expected that book to do well. No, I did not expect it to hit number one, but I expected that book to do well. And one of the reasons I expected to do well is because I regularly get a number of doctoral students who want me to read their dissertation, to endorse it as a book, to write a foreword for it. I appreciate them being excited about their work. But usually, quite frankly, I just don't see any nuggets in most of them. Maybe they're good scholarly tomes, but I don't see them really being applied to the local church. Well, Brad Wagner had asked me to bring Eric, to let me meet Eric Geiger, the co-author and really the genius behind Simple Church, and he introduced it to me. And I was listening to a dissertation proposal, and I said, oh my gosh, this is going to make a huge difference. Well, my point is, with Simple Church, I was not surprised that it had a great acceptance. I was surprised as number one. Autopsy of a Deceased Church is just different. I'd had a number of conversations with people, many of them in other churches, and they were a part of my consultation interviews, and they would tell me about the churches that they were members of that no longer exist. The church has closed its door. I began to just take notes of this fascinating information. People who were in churches that closed their doors. And whenever I get the opportunity in the context of a consultation in particular, I would ask a question about, now, tell me, how long did it take you to realize that your church was not going to survive? How long did it take you before you made the decision, or your leadership made the decision to close the doors? I talked to some pastors who were, sadly, had to be a part of a closure process for churches. I talked to church members. And before I knew it, I had a copious amount of information on churches that had died. It's information that is more case-based or subjective rather than a large quantitative objective study. But nevertheless, I had a lot of information. But I didn't feel like I had a lot of information just to turn it into a book. It was very specialized. It was very focused. So I wrote a blog post on it. And again, I thought the blog post would do very well. The blog post was by the book of the same name, Autopsy of a Deceased Church. Well, I wrote the book, and before I knew it, the blog was viral as viral can be. tens and then hundreds of thousands, and the number of reviews of it, it was like a clicker clicking continuously. And no, no, knowing that this book had this kind of impact upon churches, I immediately called up my editor and said, "Let me tell you what's happening." He said, "How quickly can you write a book called Autopsy of a Deceased Church?" And I did it pretty quickly because I already had all the information. It's a little book. It's one of those 14,000, 16,000 word books. I don't remember exactly. But did I think this book would hit number one? Well, I did, only not number one. I knew that it would do well after the blog came out. I did not think the topic would resonate that well with churches. I mean, how many churches want to study about dead churches? How many church leaders want to study? Well, I found out there's a lot of folks. And here's what you can get from Autopsy of Deceased Church if you have not read it already. It will give you what happened in churches that died so your church does not have to. It will give you what happened in churches that died so your church doesn't have to die. And there's so many stories in there that you say, why didn't they do this? Well, they weren't aware of it. They were unwilling to do it. They were unwilling to change it. Read the book. It's story-based. And before I knew it, not only would a church leader buy this book, but he'd buy it for members of the church. And they would go through it and they'd begin to read this book and say, oh my goodness, these are some of the same signs we have. We need to change now. And I got to say, I have heard countless stories of churches that turned around because their eyes were awakened by looking at dead churches. My late father, when my sister died, she preceded me before I was born. She preceded me in death. So I never knew Amy, my sister. As a matter of fact, my parents only planned to have 2 children. So they said that I came along as a result that my sister that predeceased me died. And my dad was so brokenhearted with the death of his daughter that when it came time for her autopsy, he said he wanted to be there. I can't imagine being in an autopsy of any kind. I have a weak stomach as it is. But to be in an autopsy of my own child, and I remember asking him later in my life, and definitely his, he's with the Lord now, Dad, why did you want to go and be in the room with Amy's autopsy? He said, I felt like if I heard what happened to her, I could help my other children so it wouldn't happen to them. And then I realized my dad was in an autopsy for me. And whatever he could find out for me, and then my brother could help us because he would discover, and she did have, for simplicity, I don't know all the medical implications behind it, but she had a tumor on the heart. And so that is always something that I say when I go to my doctor. Let me tell you what my sister had, and they understand it right away. Same thing with Autopsy of Deceased Church. Autopsy of Deceased Church tells us what happened in churches that died so ours don't have to. And once again, I would just commend to you to get the book. And, if you're struggling with members in your church who don't think that change is necessary, that you can just keep on doing things the way you've always done them, Autopsy is the book, I think, that can open eyes. And so how can this help the church? It can get church members ready for change that are reluctant to change. That has been the number one contribution of Autopsy of a Deceased Church. It was released 12 years ago, and it is still selling very well today. I am grateful, but above all, I am grateful for the churches that have been helped by seeing what happens when they learn what a church can do, if they look at what churches did that died. I hope that's helpful for you. Hey, let me just remind you of this. We got a great new directory out, the Everything Church Resources directory. It's just what it says it is. Anything that you can think of for your church, from where's the best place to get education to where's my best curriculum, who's the best stewardship company. And we don't give best, but we give lists of them. You got thousands and thousands of churches, of organizations listed there. Our team has done a great job doing this. We'll be updating it every 6 months. It's yours free. You can see the download there. You can download a PDF and print it out if you want to, or you can just look at it online and save it online on your favorites and look at the flippable version, the page turning version, and we'll continue to update that. It's just a ministry we have, and it's available for free to all of you. Thanks again for being a part of the Church Answers podcast as we continue to look this week at 3 of my number one best-selling books, hopefully for the right motive on my part to help the church for the glory of God. See you as I talk next episode about I Am a Church Member.